pull together just a couple of like slides to talk through some things for you guys. One of the things, the world I live in is mostly marketing, so that's going to be kind of the emphasis and the focus of what I'll talk about today. One of the first things that you should know about marketing is you become an absolute expert in PowerPoint. I pulled this deck together in about 10 minutes earlier today. I was like thinking about what I wanted. It's not a reflection of like the preparation. It's a matter of like, okay, I'm like ready to make the thing. So that's one of the interesting things that I thought about just today as introductions to the world of marketing. As you guys are, what class level are you guys at? Like sophomore, junior, senior, etc.
I think we have a mix.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking for those, is anyone senior?
Yeah.
You are. So you guys are. Where are you going to Michigan?
No, I haven't yet committed.
Okay. What about you?
I don't know yet.
Okay. Do you guys know majors, or do you have thoughts on
Finance.
On what?
Finance major.
Finance.
Yeah, probably computer science.
Computer science. Cool. Okay. Well, one of the things that I've seen a lot of the programs. I had an intern a couple of years ago that was a sophomore at USC, and there's a lot of programs now that do kind of disciplinary teaching. So if you go into finance, like you're still going to need to know how to communicate to the business people, and if you do computer science, you're going to need to understand like product objectives within like the world in which you're building. So something that's been really interesting for me, and I'll talk about through the course of doing marketing, is it is one of, and it's becoming probably the like brain center of most businesses. So a lot of times now, marketing departments will run like financial modeling, like with the help of a financial analyst. It'll stem from the marketing department. Like the product development will be like trying to meet consumer. I mostly do consumer marketing. So understand like what the consumers want and make new products designed for those people, rather than the product team saying, oh, we want to build this cool thing, even though it may not actually be useful to the people that it's designed for. So kind of a quick intro. So outside of Bell, I grew up in Fremont. I'm class of '03. Some of my best friends I've met here still to this day live across the Bay Area, San Francisco. I had a couple of good offers. I ended up choosing UC San Diego as my college. I was in Eleanor Roosevelt. There's like 6 colleges within the college itself. This was sort of a more liberal arts and like worldview, like international focused colleges where like all the international students lived, a bunch of other stuff. So it's an interesting choice for me. I went in undeclared and graduated with an international studies degree. It was pretty like broad. I took everything from history classes, finance classes, kind of business oriented classes, things like that. Did a lot of writing, became pretty good at it over the course of time, and I actually minored in theater, focusing on playwriting. It was kind of just for fun. I definitely recommend it, especially for you guys in the seniors, as you go in. I hammered on a bunch of classes early so that my last 2 years I could kind of mess around and try new things. I actually took a psychology class where I was a guinea pig for military experiments using Star Wars StarCraft as the medium. So I got to play video games and get college credits. That was pretty sweet. And then I played rugby while I was there for all 4 years. I did track and football here at Bell, and then kind of shifted over to rugby as a kind of a new version of that, which I really loved. Relatively competitive. We weren't that great. Got beat up a bunch, but it was a lot of fun while I was there. And then pretty much out of school, I got a job at EA. Does anyone play Battlefield?
Yeah.
Good. So I started working on Battlefield in 2007. So I helped launch Battlefield Bad Company 1, Bad Company 2, Battlefield 1943, Battlefield 3. And then I moved over to some other projects. I also worked on the Medal of Honor games, and then I helped them kind of advise because I had so much history for Battlefield 4. I didn't work on Battlefield 1. I don't know what you guys think about all of them. Pretty interesting stuff. The team that's been developing the Star Wars games, that was like my homeschool team, the guys at DICE. I lived out in Sweden for 3 months in 2009, building a lot of like team rapport. Like if you guys play sports or on any of the team, you guys are even in this club, you know what it's like when you spend a lot of time like hanging out, like working on tough projects together. You learn to trust each other, you build a lot of teamwork. That is even more important sometimes and harder when you're in a professional environment, because when money is at stake, people don't play nice. Like it's not like after you lose a football game, you're upset, yeah, but like no real repercussions outside of maybe some injuries. People lose jobs when like you don't bring in the money, so it's a pretty intense environment sometimes. So that teamwork can go a long way. I worked on a bunch of products. I was there for about 6 years. Loved it, but I have kind of a big affinity for a lot of action sports. I snowboard, I wakeboard, I fly planes, I do a bunch of other stuff that just kind of fit right for me. And I started capturing a lot of my experiences with GoPros in 2000. 11, I think was my first one. I lost a bunch of them. One's at the bottom of the lake somewhere, like all kinds of stuff. But I just loved that company, and I loved the brand that they were building and who they were. So I ended up actually getting a job there. I kind of did a blind outreach through LinkedIn, found someone that was relatively connected to me, had some similar kind of job interests, and got a job there and worked there for about 2.5 years during a peak time for them. So I started the end of 2013. I left in early 2016. So I got to see the company launch one of their biggest products. We made over $1 billion in a year. The year after that, we made $1.4 billion. We went public as a company, which was a cool and fun experience. And then the bottom fell out, and we fired almost half the people over the course of time. I left as it was starting to fall apart because I couldn't move into a role that I wanted. It was an awesome learning experience to have, and working for something, a company in particular that you're passionate about goes a really long way. So I would recommend, as you guys develop, and whether it's internships you pick or paid or unpaid stuff, whatever you may do, and as you progress, from college on, whatever, try if you can to find, companies that you believe in, products you believe in, people that you believe in more so than anything, because it helps you work hard and late through the nights when you need to do that, and add some kind of extra purpose to it. I thought it was really cool. And then since then, I went to a small startup for about a year. It failed, and I started my own company. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But one of the things that I did was this class called Reforge. It's essentially like a modern day MBA. So it's a 8-week, pretty intensive class designed for working professionals that have anywhere from like 2 to 10, maybe even more years of experience under their belt. And it's focused specifically on growth. Has everyone heard of like growth hacking, like that terminology? No, that's right. It's more of it's kind of like a fledgling professional development chain. I'll talk a little bit about it. It's essentially the idea of building a product, the engineering team behind it, and then the marketing team to support that, and building like an iterative cycle. I have a couple of like slides. I'm happy to share these at the end too. There's links in here if you guys are curious to poke around and some of this stuff. But I did this class last year. So it was about like 8 to 10 weeks, pretty intensive, probably like 8 to 10 hours a week on top of like working as well. So nights, online sessions, things like that. And it completely helped me pivot into a new direction of what I wanted to do. So I took that and I ended up starting my own company the very beginning of this year called Energize Response. I do consulting. It's focused on growth marketing. So that's mostly focused on companies that have had a product in market for a certain period of time, not maybe terribly long, or maybe they introduced something new, and they're starting to see traction and growth, right? Like the numbers are looking positive. They're not really sure always like why it's working. This is a really common thing. And it's really tough, frankly. There's so many factors. Mostly I work in consumer products, and getting you guys in your age range to figure out why something is like gaining traction, it's cool. Like, so how many of you guys use Snapchat? Yeah. Most. Is it cooler now or less cooler than it was a year ago?
Cooler.
Cooler. Why?
Because it has all the news stuff on it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. What about Instagram? What about over the last year?
The stories.
Stories.
Yeah.
Which one of those two is the cooler platform?
Snapchat right now.
Really?
Instagram is kind of like more of another like task to go through people's stories, because the posts are already enough.
Okay.
Stories are unnecessary.
Yeah, and you can connect with people more on Snapchat too. So
Yeah.
In what way?
you have like a more personal conversation with them, because you're like exchanging messages.
So one, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you guys think about that new redesign, like splitting the two sides?
With Snapchat?
With Snapchat. Have you guys seen that? If you update your app, there's now kind of like two sections. There's like the friend section and the contact
Yeah.
section. Do you guys like that, or is that just whatever?
It's whatever.
Yeah, okay. This is interesting. So from a business perspective, Snapchat is failing. They've been losing money over and over. Like no one from a professional side of, they're still kind of making revenue, but it is not the business that it was even a year ago. And Snap is struggling to figure out how to like monetize you guys essentially. Like it's a younger audience that likes it and uses it. I personally, I'm 33. I've been using Snapchat almost not at all anymore. I was using it a lot last year, and Instagram has come like back up to the top for me for different reasons than you guys. You can tell just like the age gap alone. I'm trying to figure out what works for you guys and what works for me is not going to be the same because we have different needs that we go through. Yeah.
Yeah, something I noticed is like a lot of like smaller businesses, to like get information out, they'll use Instagram Instagram over Snapchat because it's much easier to get content out on Instagram.
It is.
And you can pin.
Commerce.
Yeah.
Commerce on it too.
Yeah, and like you can pin stuff on Instagram. With Snapchat, you can't really pin things.
Yeah, by design, it's meant to go away.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't. It's hard unless you capitalize on that exact moment, which is good because you know it's going to go away. If you're interested in something, you're probably more likely to be like, ooh, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to have it, or you'll have to try and go back later and find it, which is a lot harder. So the reason I bring this up is when you look at one of the things that I've noticed, and I use that example because it's an easy one, but what I've done with my company is go in and ask these questions to people, and does this logic of asking like who your users are, what the product does, we call it like what problems it's solving or what jobs is it doing. You know, Snapchat, the job it does for you guys is connecting with your friends, right? And like offer entertainment and whatever else it may be. This logic applies across the board. So that was sort of like how I pulled that out and started using it to apply across the board. Yeah.
Wait, so when you say consulting, are you like just like helping those help other companies like get on the right path financially? Yeah,
and financially is usually the byproduct of figuring out the market. And so what I mean by that, there's usually three components that are most critical. It's the larger industry of the world that this product and company lives in. That's one. The second is the product itself. Like what does it do? How does it work? Is it working? All that other stuff. And then three is the customer. Like who is it really for? And how is the product fitting the customer within the larger context of the market? Those are the three pieces you look at. It sounds relatively simple, like, oh, there's three things, like we'll figure those out, we got it. They're really, each of those are quite dynamic because if the market shifts, then the customer shifts, then your product has to shift, and they're not linear, you know what I mean? Like the market could shift a little, but it could totally disrupt the way the customers think and operate. Like I think about the iPhone, you guys were all pretty freaking young, so when the touchscreen came out, we all did, you guys remember Blackberries, so there's hopefully a joke for you guys, right? Like, oh, Blackberry, whatever. Like, when I was here in this classroom, I didn't have Kia 67, 60 or something. Like, we were playing Snake on our phones. We're like, this is best. Or like camera attachments. You had to plug the attachment into your cell phone to like take a photo, and it was so garbage. But you did it just because it was fun. You think about how those shifts have changed, right? Like touchscreen now is everything. You guys all have surfaces. You almost barely even know the tactile world of like what we had growing up. If everyone's just like, oh yeah, we'll keep solving problems for like Blackberries, those companies are all out of business, right? Yeah. That's how you have to kind of look at these problems, and things change even faster now between like the digital age. Like a lot of things are commoditized. I mean, you can stand up a website super fast. You can build an app super fast. You can move quickly, and that just moves the entire pace of the business. So I help people kind of maximize the resources they have against the goals that they're going after from a consulting side. And I know that's kind of a little vague for you guys. Without going into too much detail, it's probably the best way to describe it. And along the way doing this, so starting this year, I've had about 6 or 7 contracts, like consulting contracts throughout the year. And one of them was a company called 40W, and they picked me up pretty much full time. I really love the product. I mostly really love the team, and that's one of the things I'd like to leave you guys with is who you work with, like in the future, is so much more important than what it is you are working on. I know that's hard to believe sometimes. Like if you have your favorite company, whatever that may be, and they like offer you a job, and you're like, I'm willing to like take a crappy role or work on a team that I don't really like, or like work 20 hours a day. There are cases for that where that can be made if you think it's achieving your goals. After 10 years of working professionally, I can tell you that the thing that I've walked away with, and that's been most important for me, is who you work with makes that connection so much stronger and will drive kind of a better, I think, overall happiness and health with you, in your professional career down the line. That's obviously up for you guys to figure out as you go. The company, we're in stealth mode right now, so I'm not really like talking too much about what we do. So unfortunately, I can't like offer an internship or do any kind of stuff like that. We're 12 people. We all work virtually. So I work from home most of the time now, which is pretty cool. Home in August was the month, or the island of Oahu in Hawaii. I have a friend that left his house there. I went and stayed in his house. I brought my laptop and my cell phone, and I learned how to kiteboard and do a bunch of stuff out there. So pretty fun to have the ability to like run around and be a virtual employee. I think that's going to be more and more of a legitimate option for you guys as you get older, especially consultants. I read something the other day, 30% of all consultants are virtual employees. So people that work from home, I work from a co-working space sometime, pretty untraditional. I don't have to show up to a desk. You can imagine that not commuting 2 hours a day gets you a lot more hours in the day to get stuff done, which is cool. And then one of the reasons I joined this team is that I got to be kind of a foundational team member. I'm not a founder, but I was the second person they put on payroll. So there was a pretty kind of cool element of being right in the mix from the very beginning. Some people want to go do that like right when you're out of college, quitting college, whatever. Everyone hears the glory stories of, from Evan at Snapchat to Steve Jobs, whatever it may be. Figure out what's right for you. I wouldn't have been ready to do this probably like 4 years ago. I wouldn't have felt like I had enough of a skill set to do it, but now I do. So kind of worked for me. And then I'll just kind of rip through some of this stuff. I'll send these to Aaron or whoever, so you guys can check out some of the links that you'll see later in this. But this idea of growth, I know it's new for all of you guys, so it's totally fine. It's still pretty niche within the professional world itself. It's not even widely recognized yet as a practice, like finance is a function, marketing is a function. Growth it's starting to establish itself as it could be a function for us. And for me, it's about the intersection of these three things: product, marketing, and engineering. For if you guys are wondering like what the difference is between product and engineering, engineering is the building of the thing and like kind of the features and the power behind it. Product is the development of like the reasons why we're building this thing, like and the team that helps shape the structure of what that final product is. Engineering is the one like that's hammering away on the code and things like that. And obviously marketing is the one that helps position it, helps people understand like why this product is important or what it does, etc. So that's that. The system which really for me develops, or what three pillars of growth are, is having a growth mindset. This could be best summed up into never being locked in. Hey, good seeing you. Never being like kind of stuck within the thinking that today. Like we talked about that iPhone example, right? If everyone's like, oh, BlackBerry is going to be the last thing that we ever going to use as a touch device, as a handheld device, and then the iPhone comes out and they just disregard it, that person's irrelevant, right? Like the world changes quick, so you need to be able to disregard, evaluate, and disregard what you think you knew yesterday because things have changed today. And at the same time, like evaluate when you see something, or maybe that's a trend or changing. And ask yourself if that's where you want to be, if that is the right fit for your product. And some things don't work. I'm trying to think of, did any of you guys ever use the app Yo? Remember Yo? It was around for about a month. And it had, yeah, all it did was say yo. You could send the word yo to your friends, and that was it. No context, no nothing else. And it got, I think, 15 million downloads in a month, or maybe less. And then it disappeared the next month, right? Like, cool, try stuff, doesn't always work. But that's part of like what the growth mindset is. And I can tell you the people that did that, like they had a really nice, wild idea. I'm glad that they went for it and tried it out, but it's not gonna work. And anything you read, 1 in 10 startups are gonna actually make it to business and profitability. Only 1 of 100 of those are gonna become a unicorn worth $1 billion. So you don't just hit it on the first try, you fail a lot before you make something happen. The second piece of this is design thinking. So this is around the idea of like the desk that you're sitting in, like, yeah, okay, what do they need to do? They need to hold you up, they need to give you a flat writing surface, but you got in things like ergonomics, or like what material should be made out of, like, is it lightweight? Like I noticed that all your things are now rounded corners. I have like a scar on my body from like hitting a flat, hard metal desk from forever ago. Like let's round those corners out and like prevent. It's like basic stuff, but right, the design thinking is not just like let's solve for the problem in front of us. It's kind of like it's like adding like creative drawing to calculus is like how I would relate it for you guys. Something abstract, but as you think about solving the problem, there are kind of creative ways and different ways of looking at solving it. And then the last one, this won't really apply for you guys, but agile development. That essentially means building your team in ways that you don't just commit to a huge project and blindly do it and finish it. Along the way, you check in. So what this usually means, if you guys have ever heard the term sprint, so 2 weeks or 3 weeks, a little group and team will say, okay, this is what we're going to complete at the end of it. It's a little piece of the larger puzzle, and you keep building little pieces so that as something changes, as the market changes, as whatever changes, you don't have to completely throw away the work you've been doing. Certain pieces will remain for forever. Certain pieces will change and iterate. But this is really important to like making it work. And I think most relevant for you guys, this is essentially your growth team. If you want to aspire to be someone in like the growth world, you have your hipster, your hacker, and your hustler. And I thought this was kind of like a great way of talking about what these guys are, like what they do. You know, the hipster is someone that's like more on the creative side. The hacker is obviously the growth hacking thing, like I talked about. Someone that like goes in, you know, finds efficiencies, maybe hacks a system. A great one. Have you guys ever stayed in an Airbnb or ever actually used the booking system or anything? One, two.
Yeah.
The original way Airbnb got a lot of traction early on was they hacked into Craigslist code, and every time an Airbnb posting went up, they cloned and copied that and then sent it over to Craigslist as like a temporary rental thing for people to find, right? Craigslist was a known place for people to find housing, whether it was temporary or permanent or whatever. And a lot of people stumbled kind of across like, oh, like a vacation thing, like this is kind of interesting. And they got a lot of early traction that way, like that's the hacker side of things. And then the hustler is like, that's your business person. If you want to be in the mix, like reading the market and reading the customers and knowing where your product can be, building partnerships and relationships, that's why he's holding all the money, because he's the one that kind of directs like where you spend your effort and energy, where the money and the revenue and the business model are going to come from, all into one. So that's the last one I'll leave you guys with. That's all I got for today. So that's, I don't know, it's a bit about my world. Yeah, questions?
I'm kind of like interested in the Reforge program. Like, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the program, you guys all probably know Uber, right? The head of growth at Uber, his name is Andrew Chen, and a guy that worked for a small business startup did incredibly well called HubSpot, Brian Balfour. These two guys that came together, and they've been sort of thought leaders in the growth space for a while. They've been talking and writing essays about these things. Some of their blogs get over like 1 million and so a month of readers, and they basically teamed up and built this kind of series of content. Think about like any of your classes here. You have, you know, chapters and kind of like lecture pieces that build on top of each other. They did a similar thing and kind of outlined the world of growth and actually made it like applicable. So, you know, if you're going to be a financial person, you're going to need to understand a lot of like complicated math stuff and statistics and things like that. They basically gave chunks of that to growth professionals for them to help understand not just their one layer. A lot of like engineers go in this. I'm in marketing. There's a lot of like business operations. Different people need to be on the same page if you're going to make the growth stuff work. Like I can't do my job effectively if my engineering team doesn't believe in what we're doing to go do it. So I need the engineers to buy into the system, the mindset as well. So that's kind of like a gist. It's something that would be, like I said, it's something that you'll want to do like a year or two after you would be graduating. It's great to like, you could even just start reading their essays and see if any of it even makes sense without the context of like working in a professional environment. But that's kind of a good place to start with it. Any other questions? I'm trying to think of how it most applies to like where you guys are at right now and like what you're looking forward to in the future. I don't know if you guys have questions about whether it's like finding a job, the transition from college or high school, any of that other stuff.
As far as like college terms, like did you ever think about a graduate program, or you like when you found Reforge, was that kind of like similar to a graduate program in a way, or?
That is a great question, and that is for people like my age. I'd say that is one of the hardest and largest professional decisions you have to make right now is do you do, like for me, an MBA or not? I looked at it, I have friends that have done them, and I did a little bit. I do a lot of like modeling, financial modeling, relatively basic, not crazy complex, and I did my own model at the money I was making at the time, the career progression I was still expecting. I got promoted at EA every single year, and so I was progressing really fast, not just from a money perspective, but from a career perspective of getting to places I wanted to be and having the skill sets develop at the rate I wanted. And then I looked at, okay, what happens? Like, if I go to a school, you know, I'd say on average now you're probably looking at like $100,000 a year total in debt that you'd be taking on for a grad program. So $200K in debt, maybe more. They take on, you also are 2 years now out of your career progression. Hypothetically, the MBA is like progressing along. When I did my model, it didn't check out. And part of it was I was enjoying the working world so much, but I didn't want to go back to school and be in a non-applied environment. And I know that MBAs in particular, they make an emphasis so that it's like real world stuff you can take right back into it. But at the same time, it doesn't always work that well. And there's a lot of there's kind of promoters for both sides. It comes down to the personal decision. I have friends that have done it, still doing excellent. I have friends that have done it, they were struggling. I have friends that haven't done it, they've been struggling. Like, it's across the board. It's something to keep in mind. I would always try and keep your options open. I think in particular, one of the things that I made a big shift on, my GPA, my sophomore year of college, I went into my finals like a 3.5. I didn't really care. I walked out with a 3.1. I was not stoked about that. And so then my last 2 years, I finished with like a 3.8, 3.9 average in college. And it was pretty good. My major was a 3.5. And I realized that semester when I just totally tanked, I walked out and I was like, you know what? I don't want to go to grad school, but I want to have the option to do that. And so I like saddled back up and crushed my classes and like walked out with a respectable GPA, because I didn't want to walk out graduating with a piece of paper and a 3.0. And I graduated Bell with a 4.2, and I was like, that's not the student I want to be, and I want to leave that door open. So I would just say, keep your options open. Don't close the doors behind you.
Can you talk about your experience at GoPro? And you briefly mentioned, it was certainly going really well, and then all of a sudden it wasn't.
Yeah.
What were some of the signs that you saw to A, sort of say, I need to go somewhere else? And B, what maybe could you teach these guys, especially being in Silicon Valley, knowing that there's so many startups that don't work versus those that do, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe talk about that experience.
The biggest takeaway from that is asking the hard questions. And like, you guys you're green now. You're gonna be green for a while. You're always, you are in beginning stages of many parts of your life. And even as like a senior here in school, like, you now know the way around. Of course, you guys are like the kingpins here. You're about to next year be back on the bottom, and that's going to be a recurring theme, like over and over and over. And it's something you need to be comfortable with. And it's also going back to the people thing I was telling you about, like where you choose. I've been choosing my companies and my teams by the people, not by the product. And find people that respect youth and age, and like don't look at you as you don't know anything. Like, you may not have the experience, you may not know like what I know about growth, but it doesn't mean you don't have great ideas and can't process and understand them. So I don't look at this as in particular for GoPro, there was a lot of, I've worked in motorsports for 10 years and I raced cars, and these would be people saying this and be like, I know exactly what we need to do. And you're like, well, do you? Like, is this really the right thing? Like, it was GoPro failed because people failed to challenge the status quo. And Nick Woodman, who's the CEO, I've never seen or heard of or been in a company that is more monarchy than GoPro. He runs everything. We were a $1 billion plus company, 2,000 plus people. I ran all of the marketing and advertising for like TV and billboards and things that you would see like in those environments. And I, every month, had to get in front of him and approve every single print ad, like a magazine ad. Every single one of them had to be approved by him. As you would imagine, a company that size, that is hyper inefficient. And he just couldn't let go of like the reins and controls. So and directly to your question, what happened was we built a product that no one wanted, and everyone just drank the Kool-Aid and just like chugging it, and no one challenged it. And at the time, I wasn't working on the product. I didn't actually have like a direct say in that. And when my kind of like rolled up manager, who had a big voice but got drowned out by a lot of people that just were chugging Kool-Aid out of every possible chance they could, he asked me, he's like, you haven't seen a lot of this, like, look at all this work, what do you think? And I was like, this is an absolute disaster. And that was 2 months before we launched this product, and I actually got really freaked out. I was like, oh my God, this thing is going in completely the wrong direction. And from a detail perspective, like, the price was wrong, the features were wrong, it was marketed to the wrong type of person. And then the worst thing, what we ended up seeing, is that nobody could tell these products apart. Does anyone own a GoPro?
Yeah.
1, 2. Yeah, that's a big problem. Again, that's a whole separate topic. Which ones do you guys have?
I'm not sure.
4?
Silver 3 plus.
Silver 3.
I'm not sure.
Is it a square or is it look
Square.
Like the session?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. That product is basically what tanked us.
Mm-hmm.
No one could figure out the difference between the 4 and the session. And so we ended up cannibalizing our own sales, selling a lesser product that delivered a worse experience and actually made us less money all at the same time. And that was the tank for us.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys.